Hi, and welcome to ELA Grade 12. We are in Week 3, Lesson 10, and I'll be walking you through our distance learning lesson for the day. I'll start off by just reviewing the resources and materials that we'll need for the lesson, give you a brief overview of the learning. I'll do a quick model for you for some of the reading and thinking that we'll be doing in the lesson, and then I'll quickly preview what's coming next. Let's start with our riddle of the day. So if you have any family members near you, or you have anyone in the house that you want to share this riddle with, go ahead and gather them around your screen. I will read this out loud to you while you read along with me. What is seen in the middle of March and April that can't be seen at the beginning or end of either month? So read that again to yourselves if you want to. Take a minute to think about it, and then go ahead and pause the video if you need to keep thinking, because I am about to show you the answer. Okay. The letter R. So the letter R is in the middle of both March and April, but it's not at the beginning or end of either month. So that was just something quick to get your wheels spinning as we dive into today's lesson. So for today, like I said, we are on lesson 10, which you can find on page 41 of your learning packet. You'll also need access to the note catcher, which is on page 42, and then as always, just something to write with. And the text that we are reading today is called Back to My Own Country, an essay by Andrea Levy. And what we'll need today specifically is page 32 and then pages 36 and 37. So to go ahead and make sure you have access to all of your materials before moving on with the video. Okay, so here is our learning target for today. Let's read it together. I can write a summary of key paragraphs in a text. So today, after reading part of the text, your writing assignment will be to summarize some of what you read. We'll review the key parts of a summary later on in the lesson. First, let's talk about our new text. As I mentioned, the title of the text is Back to My Own Country, an essay, and we are actually going to be reading an excerpt of it. You do have the full text in your packet, but we're just going to be focusing on the second half of the text for our time together. The purpose of our reading is to look at a first-hand account of how British colonialism complicated the idea of home. So thinking about this idea of, can a person feel at home in a country where they are seen as different or not belonging? Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to continue our exploration of how British colonialism complicated the idea of home by reading this first-hand account. In this essay, Andrea Levy writes about her experience being raised in Britain as a person of Caribbean heritage. We'll see how the historical events that we learned about in A Changing World last week affected people's identity and sense of home generations later. As we read, we'll keep coming back to these two guiding questions. First, how did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? And second, what does it mean to call a place home? In the text, the author reflects about her upbringing, how she was raised, and the things she learned about when she was younger. Before we start reading, I'd like you to think back to when you were younger. Think about the following question from your learning packet. What lessons about life have you learned since you were younger? How did you learn them? How do you feel when you look at your younger self? Write your response in the top section of the note catcher. Go ahead and pause the video to do that now. Now that you've answered the Jumpstart question in your note catcher, we'll move on to the reading. There are 3 sections that you'll be reading today. This text is fairly long, so we've decided to focus on reading and analyzing only the second half of the text together. However, the full text is printed in your packet so that you can read the first part of the essay on your own and so that you can refer to it throughout the lessons as needed. In the first section that we won't be analyzing together, the author talks more about her upbringing and tells the reader about specific moments that she remembers from her childhood. The first section we'll be reading together today is the About the Author section. Then you'll read the background of the text, which is on page 32 of your packet. And finally, you'll read paragraphs 23 through 26, which you can find on pages 36 and 37. I'll show you the About the Author section on this video in a minute because you don't have it printed in your learning packet. However, as you read the rest of today's reading, I'd like you to do our usual first read annotations that you see on the screen here. As you read the essay, the background section and the paragraphs on the screen here, you'll be annotating by underlining the words, phrases, or sentences that stand out to you, drawing a box around any unfamiliar words or phrases, and writing down any reactions, opinions, or questions that you have about the text in the margins. First, take a few minutes to read about the author. Pause the video now and read the section on your screen. Now that you've read this section, you can start to see why this text is included in this unit and why we are reading it now. We just finished reading A Changing World, in which we learned about British colonialism. Now we are finding out that the author of this text has parents who emigrated from Jamaica to Britain, and that she often writes about her cultural identity and the questions that come up about it now that colonialism has ended. We'll read about how the colonialism her home country experienced has complicated the idea of home for her and how this has affected her feelings on what it means to call a place home. Those two questions are here on your screen, and they're also in your learning packet, so you can keep referring back to them while we study this text together. Now it's your turn to read a few sections in your packet. The background on page 32, and then paragraphs 23 through 26. As you read, notice the types of information that the author includes and annotate the passage using the first reading annotations that are shown on the screen. Pause the video here and do that now. Next, I'd like you to reread paragraphs 23 and 24 and underline the words that tell you information about the author or that help you understand the point of view expressed. So you're underlining for information that you learn about the author or anything that helps you understand her point of view. So pause the video again and make those marks now. Okay, now that you've gone back and annotated those two paragraphs, I'll show you one note that I made. So here's a sentence that I underlined that gave me information about the author. I realized for the first time that I had a background and an ancestry that was fascinating and worth exploring. This also helps me understand her point of view. She writes that she realized her ancestry was fascinating and worth exploring. She may have felt lost before her visit to Jamaica. She had never met that part of her family before, and as I was reading this, especially the part of the paragraph that came before the sentence, I was wondering to myself how that must have felt for her. Because she hadn't met them or experienced the culture in Jamaica, it's possible that she wasn't sure how important it would be to her. It sounds like her visit to Jamaica changed her and really helped to form her identity. I jotted down a few notes in the margin, as you can see here. I just jotted down, may have felt lost before the visit. Visiting Jamaica helped form her identity. Those are just the thoughts that came to me as I went back and underlined that part of the paragraph. There are other parts of the paragraph that give you more information about the author and her point of view, but this is just an example of one part that you might have marked. Next, I'd like you to discuss the text. First, we'll start with some vocabulary. With a family member, friend, or classmate, talk about the following vocabulary words. Are any familiar to you? Which ones? Assimilate, entitlement, upbringing, myriad, indigenous, and hybrid. Once you've talked about those vocabulary words with someone, move on to the second prompt here. Tell your family member or friend what you learned about British colonization and slavery in the Caribbean. Did anything from the passage surprise you? Pause to have these conversations now. When you come back, it'll be time for your daily writing activity. We'll end our lesson with our daily writing. On the bottom of your note catcher, write a summary of paragraphs 25 and 26. Remember that a summary is a concise, complete, objective overview of the text. It shouldn't contain your opinions or interpretations. After writing, I'd like you to share the answer to your Jumpstart question with somebody who knew you when you were younger. Ask that person if they agree with your writing. And have they noticed any other life lessons that you've learned? They may have some insight that you may have overlooked. To preview what's coming next, we will continue reading, we'll make our way through a few more paragraphs, continue annotating, and continuing answering questions about the text. If you have questions about this lesson or need support, feel free to email your teacher. And just a few quick reminders before we leave. Don't forget to talk about your lesson with someone and share that Jumpstart response with them. Read for 20 minutes and complete an entry on your reading log. And also practice your reading fluency using the first or second page of your weekly reading. Thank you for learning with me today, and I look forward to teaching you again soon.